let's go back in time. The date is April 18th, 1943. Picture it. You're high above Cape Bon in Tunisia. The Mediterranean is glittering below you in the afternoon sun. All around you are German transport planes, these huge, slow-moving aircraft, just lumbering their way back to Sicily. For them, the mission's over. They've just resupplied the famous Afrika Korps. But what they have no way of knowing is that they are flying straight into a perfectly set trap. In the next 15 minutes, one of the most lopsided, brutal air battles in history is about to erupt. An event so shocking that the American pilots who were there would give it a name that lasts forever: the Palm Sunday Massacre.
Just look at that number, 10-1. Let that sink in for a second. For every single Allied plane that went down, the Axis lost 10. This wasn't a dogfight. No, this was a total execution. A kill ratio like that is so insane it's almost hard to believe. It wasn't just a victory, it was a sign that something fundamental had shifted. It was a new kind of air power that the German High Command literally thought was impossible. And the shock of this one number, it would send ripples far, far beyond the clear blue skies of North Africa.
Okay, let's break this down because the raw data here tells an absolutely brutal story. The Allies lost a total of 7 planes. 7. That's it. Now look at the Axis column. This wasn't just a bad day. This was an utter catastrophe. We know from German records that 24 of their big Ju-52 transport planes were just blown from the sky. Another 35 were so shot up they were basically useless scrap metal. And that's not even counting the 10-plus elite fighter escorts that were destroyed trying to protect them. You have to imagine it. The sky was literally raining fire and wreckage.
And this, right here, is the central mystery we're going to solve. How does something like this even happen? The Luftwaffe wasn't some second-rate air force. These guys were seasoned veterans flying battle-tested planes. So how in the world were they so completely and totally taken apart in less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee? Well, the answer changes our whole understanding of modern warfare.
So, the first piece of the puzzle. It's not a secret plane, it's not some new superweapon. No, it was something completely invisible. You see, this wasn't some random encounter in a vast sky. The American and British fighters weren't just on a lucky patrol. They were there for a reason. They were waiting. This was a cold, calculated ambush, and it was possible because the Allies knew everything.
The secret had a name: Ultra. Deep in the English countryside, at a place called Bletchley Park, a team of brilliant codebreakers was doing the impossible. They were reading top-secret German messages, encrypted by their supposedly unbreakable Enigma machines, and they were often reading them almost as soon as the Germans sent them. So what the German commanders thought were their most closely guarded secrets, well, they were basically an open book for the Allies. This intelligence wasn't just an advantage, it was the advantage.
And this is how it worked. It was a brutally efficient pipeline. Step 1, a German commander sends a message. Step 2, it gets intercepted and beamed over to Bletchley Park, where it's cracked open. And then Step 3, the decoded message gets relayed to Allied commanders in North Africa. All of a sudden, they have this godlike view of the battlefield. They know the exact number of transport planes. They know their exact flight path, their altitude, even when they took off. They even know how many fighter planes are fly escort. This wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't even a fight. With that kind of information, the ambush basically planned itself.
But here's the most incredible part of this whole story. It was a complete failure of imagination on the German side. We know from interviews after the war that their high command simply would not believe their precious Enigma code could ever be broken. It was unthinkable. So they wrote off this whole massacre as a 1-in-a-million fluke, a lucky shot. That single, arrogant assumption was a fatal mistake. It basically handed the Allies a skeleton key to German plans for the rest of the war.
But listen, as critical as that intelligence was, it's only half the story. If we really want to understand what happened that day, we have to go deeper. Because the real truth is that this was a clash between two totally different philosophies of how to fight a war. It wasn't just about codes. It was about the very systems that built the planes and trained the pilots who flew them.
Think of it like this. On one side, you've got the American approach, which we can call the system. For them, war was an industrial problem. You solve it with overwhelming production, with team-based tactics, and with relentless comprehensive training. On the other side, you have the German warrior mystique. This was all about the lone hero, the gifted fighter ace, the individual genius. The problem was, by 1943, that mystique was built on a foundation that was just crumbling. Not enough fuel, not enough resources, and a training program that was totally falling apart.
And if you want to see that difference in a single image, this is it. Look at this chart. That isn't a gap, that's a chasm. By this point in the war,
The average American pilot was showing up to his first fight with about 400 hours in the cockpit. His German counterpart? Maybe 80 hours. That is a 5-to-1 advantage in pure experience before a single shot is even fired. The elite, tough-as-nails training that had made the Luftwaffe so feared early in the war was just a memory. Now it was a desperate pipeline, just feeding undertrained young men straight into a meat grinder.
And it wasn't just the pilots, it was the gear they were using. German pilots later talked about how their radios were constantly failing, leaving them totally unable to coordinate a defense. I mean, imagine being in a swirling dogfight, and you're essentially deaf and blind to your wingman. Meanwhile, every American pilot could talk to each other clearly, letting them work together like a pack of wolves. Even their planes, the P-40 Warhawks that the Germans thought were obsolete, had been quietly upgraded. And all of it was backed by this massive logistical machine, with all the fuel, ammo, and spare parts you could ever need. The American system was just built to last.
So this really forces us to stop and ask a pretty challenging question. Can you even call this a battle in the old-fashioned sense of the word? Or was it something else entirely? Was it just the inevitable bloody result of a superior industrial process, a system so efficient that it just overwhelmed the other side's warrior spirit? It starts to feel less like a duel and more like a mission of calculated, systematic destruction.
So, those 15 minutes of chaos are over. The guns go silent. But the consequences? Oh, they were just getting started. Let's take a look at the fallout from this. Because the shockwaves from the Palm Sunday Massacre would basically seal the deal for the entire war in North Africa.
You know, if you want to understand the immediate impact, you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to this. This is a direct quote from the war diary of General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring. He was the top German commander for the entire Mediterranean, and he wrote this on the very same day as the massacre. Daylight transport operations have become impossible. Not difficult, not dangerous, impossible. In a single afternoon, the Allies had slammed the door shut on Germany's ability to resupply its army by air during the day.
And you can see on this timeline just how fast things fell apart after that. It's like a row of dominoes. April 18th, the massacre happens. Boom, the air bridge is cut. Just 4 days later, the Luftwaffe gets desperate and tries again, this time with their enormous 6-engine Gigant transports. They send 16, and 14 of them get shot down. The lifeline is now totally gone. Less than a month after that Palm Sunday, 250,000 Axis soldiers trapped in Tunisia just surrender. The line from cause to effect is crystal clear.
This was it. This was the final nail in the coffin for the legendary Afrika Korps. They were trapped. The British Royal Navy owned the sea. And now, after Palm Sunday, the Allies owned the sky. Their supply lines were completely choked off. Their situation went from desperate to absolutely hopeless. No fuel, no ammunition, no food. For them, the fight was over. So we have to ask the big question, why does any of this matter today? I mean, it's a single air battle that happened decades ago. Who cares? Well, you should. Because the principles that were proven in that blue sky over Tunisia, they aren't just history. They're a timeless blueprint for understanding how power and conflict actually work.
Let's just boil it down to the key lessons. Lesson 1. Having better intelligence isn't just a small edge. It can give you victories that are completely out of proportion to your numbers. Lesson 2. Air superiority isn't really about glorious dogfights. It's about logistics. If you own the sky, you own your enemy's ability to fight. Lesson 3. In a long war, the quality of your training system will always beat the raw combat experience of a few hotshots. And finally, Lesson 4. A country's industrial power isn't just something in the background. It is a weapon, plain and simple.
And that really gets to the heart of what this battle represents. It was a sign of a massive shift in warfare. The romantic age of the individual hero, the chivalrous knight of the air, that was ending. And the age of systematic, technological, and brutally impersonal warfare had arrived. Those American pilots weren't there seeking individual glory. They were there to execute a mission. They killed efficiently, systematically, and without a second thought. This was modern war in its purest form.
Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Today, we live in an age of satellite intelligence, autonomous drones, and cyber attacks. The technology has changed in ways those pilots couldn't even dream of. But have the basic rules of the game really changed? Is the core conflict still about a superior integrated system versus a determined but less resourced opponent? The lessons from those 15 bloody minutes back in 1943 would suggest that the answer is a definite yes, and that might make them more relevant today than ever before.